Hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to another edition of In the Chute. Kalen, what have you got for us today?
Well, I forgot, so I gotta look again. There it is. What is natural horsemanship? So I grew up around you and grandpa and dealing with the training of horses and people looking for your product, which is a fully trained horse or a training for a horse that somebody already owns. And people always talk about, well, is it natural horsemanship? Blah, blah, blah. You go to clinics and everybody always kind of sells it as, this is natural horsemanship. So my question is, what is natural horsemanship? What does that term mean? Does it entail? And is it a Western thing? Is it a Eastern thing? Is it a United States thing? Is it an international thing? What is that term, that phrase? What does it mean and everything that comes with it?
Well, I think natural horsemanship is a branding more than anything,
Okay.
right? I mean, you've got some guys that have capitalized on a way to train, and they've called it something. And anytime you call something natural or organic, it's got to be better. Now, with that said, in my way, because I've been told that, oh, you guys are natural horsemanship trainers. Well, we were training this way generations before this branding ever came along. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to, I think the best way to define it or give it a way to separate it from something else is if you think about using the horse's natural herd behavior and their natural way of thinking, uh, how they do things normally, and you capitalize on that without restraining the horse. You're not tying them down, you're not um, tying feet up, um, you're not you're not overpowering the horse, but you're allowing them to move but using psychology of the horse's natural ability to think and their natural flight or and they normally fly. They don't fight. They will fight, but if you use those ways to manipulate them, and that's all training is a manipulation over time and with lots of repetition, then that's probably the closest thing you can call it to natural horsemanship. Now, there's lots of different variations of how people do that. I got no argument with that as long as you're not harming the horse, hurting them, scaring them, or when you start to use methods that are intimidating, and that horse is afraid of you and works in spite of you because it has to, not because it wants to. That's not natural horsemanship. That's something other than um, using their want and their ability to react naturally or in their way of thinking. Then that's a big difference. So, and I know people have, I mean, they literally beat the snot out of their horses until they comply. I was like, well, okay, horse certainly doesn't trust you. With natural means or natural horsemanship, if you want to call it that, a horse will trust you. And you can do a lot of things with that animal that you've never encountered before, but because they trust you, they will respond the way you need them to.
So do you know where that term came from at all? Because I guess this might be something we owe the audience. If you don't know where it came from, I need to look it up and research it. But
Yeah, not specifically, not to one individual. There's been a number of individuals that have claimed that they're the original. I mean, it's I like a lot of things, but it just became a term I think that a few guys threw out there, and myself included. I've said, I want this to work naturally. I do not want to overpower this horse, and so that kind of gets picked up and kicked around, and somebody goes, "Hey, maybe I should patent that idea." You know what I mean? I mean, so
right.
I think that's really how it's gone. This has been really a movement that I've known of since the '70s, probably early '70s, and some of those guys were still a little rough on some points as well. But they did some things that were more of a natural horsemanship, using that brain, that psychology of the horse to get the horse trained the way you wanted them to respond.
And then a lot of people, I've heard of natural horsemanship coming with a lot of the times, like when you're on their back and when you're actually physically riding the horse. but does it apply to just being on their back, or does it apply to being on the ground and doing groundwork, or is it the holistic training?
Well, I think it's holistic. I mean, if you're on your ground, and I do a lot of natural horsemanship on the ground, that's where I start. And I'm using probably more psychology there than once I'm actually on their back, because that that trust has already been established, and they know what to expect from me. They know I'm not gonna hurt them or violate them, and that trust is needed to be built upon. Now, I can be on their back and they can be scared, but it's usually from an external something that happens, not, and I'm the one that can, get them calmed down and set down and said, easy, you're fine. And then they again, that trust is there. So it all starts from the ground. I can't imagine that if you didn't do that, because I don't know anybody that just gets on their back and goes, not anybody who's really trying to train, because then you're going to scare them, which is counterproductive. But your groundwork is so important and such a foundational portion to their education that that has to almost happen first.
So would you say, like, I don't know, natural horsemanship is nice, is actually probably in more trainings than it's not?
I think anymore, I think probably there's a plenty of people that they'll rope a horse and choke it down, for instance, in their first interaction with it,
The
because
the
they think
traditional way.
right, and they think, well, that horse will respect that rope and they'll respect me. And I'm thinking, well, they fear you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my way of thinking. How would I react? I'd be like, man, I try to stay away from that loop and that rope and that guy as much as possible. I mean, that's because if I'm getting my air choked away and I, start to pass out, I don't know whether I'm going to die next or not. So to me, and there's plenty of people who still do that kind of stuff. So, and then they might turn around once that's happened and they might be really good, using good psychological training. I don't know, but I think for the most part, it's gotten much better. I really do. I think it's been shown that it's a lot easier on the horse. It's a lot easier, a lot more trust is built, and you have a longer trained, more dedicated horse to you with some sound training that's going to be in depth in the brain of that horse, and not fearful. And
So
so it takes more patience.
where would you say, or what happens, or what occurs, or what is utilized that would delineate natural horsemanship from something that's not?
Um, Putting pressure on to get the horse to move or do what you want, and then releasing the pressure without touching the horse, getting them to do as you wish, like our round corral training. I want to make that horse go a specific direction at a specific speed when I command it, and I never touch the horse. And then when they start to give and they accept that, then I take the pressure off. And it's just they learn that, oh, if I do this, then I get rewarded. So, you can again force a horse to do something and be really rough on them and have them fear you, and that's not natural. The other part is that watching what they do and how they accept what the training is, and watch how they would act with another herd of horses or another horse. And when they accept what's going on, then absolutely you praise them for it, and then release the pressure. But it's allowing that horse to be able to make a decision for themselves. When you are dominating that horse with a rope or some other means, and they can't make a decision, that's when they get scared. And not that they don't get scared when you're working with them, without any kind of an appliance on them or working them naturally. They will get scared at times because you've moved too fast, you've done something, but you can correct that. You can not blow them up, which is very difficult to do when they're already constrained.
Yeah. So I guess going to a point that you just said earlier, like treating them like they're in the middle of the herd and whatnot, would you say natural horsemanship goes to mimicking more of natural abilities of a horse, I guess, natural body language and horse behavior?
Yeah, you're watching their behavior. The body language is body language. We have to watch what theirs is. They don't really cue off of us quite as much, I don't think, until you teach them to. But I'm watching them. I'm watching whether they're watching me, whether they've got an ear on me, whether they've got their nose tipped to me or away from me. Um, I'm watching whether they've softened their body towards me. Um, I'm going to look for licking and chewing and blinking, all of those kinds of behavior, whether they got a head bob and dropping their heads, all of those kinds of things are important clues that they will do with each other when one is pushing another one or trying to work on some dominance. And they're happy to be not the high top dog in a horse herd. Not that we don't have dogs in our horse herds, but they're happy to be the omega, the very bottom of the herd in hierarchy, as long as they understand that. They're always going to try to challenge up, but as long as they understand their place, they're fine with it. And so that's the whole point, is that you become a herd of two, what I call, and you are the dominant member in that herd, not them. So they'll accept that, they'll understand it, they'll challenge you, and I want them to challenge. I want that horse to have some life to him. I don't want them to be so beat down and so dead that they don't even care. That's not, something you want in your horse either. So using those natural behaviors, capitalizing on them, and then teach them what I want them to do.
And then, so one final question. You wrote an article called, I think it was Cookie Cutter Training, probably
Yeah.
what, 10, 15 years ago?
Oh God.
Maybe
Closer to
longer.
20 now.
So
15 to
would
20, yeah.
would you say, based off that article, and maybe you can kind of explain some more of the details, because I haven't read it in a long time, but would you say that cookie cutter training is not natural horsemanship and natural horsemanship is something entirely different? Or do they kind of, are they like a Venn diagram and they kind of meet in the middle somewhere?
Yeah, there's kind of an overlap to it, in my opinion. Cookie cutter training is having a very specific laid out syllabus. I got to do this, I got to do this, and I got to do this. Um, and if I do that, most of the time these horses are going to turn out. And that's true. Most of the time they will, but you're always going to have horses that will challenge that or will not act like most horses will. Or they are a little bit more stubborn, or you pick the affliction to make it difficult to train, and you'll miss some of those horses. They won't always hit the target where you want them to be, and or as easily. So you have to be very, very flexible in watching what that horse is doing and giving them what they need, not what they want. How many times have you heard me say that? Give that horse what they need in order to understand. And a lot of times cookie cutter training is, and there's a good number of trainers, pretty well-known trainers that sell a system. Say, oh, you have to do this, and then you do this, and you do this. Well, that doesn't always work for every horse. So being more flexible in understanding what that horse is having trouble with, how they don't understand, how they're learning, how they accept training or accept the learning, all of those things taken into account, and you make the adjustment so that they can then learn and become what you want them to be. Now you're not just cookie cutter training, and you're not just stamping out a horse the same way every time. If you do that, you're going to miss some really good opportunities to train some really good horses really well. So you'll get most of them, but you have to be very flexible, and that was my take on that.
That makes sense. All right, perfect. I think with that, we will put natural horsemanship out to pasture.